Yeah, what? So which laptop do you have? Do you have a MacBook Pro?
It's a 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro, yeah.
Cool. I used to have one of those. I had the first gen one. This is probably a good conversation to have to lead into our discussion on Apple Keynotes. The best, the worst, and the ugly.
It's the good, the bad, and the ugly is what you're thinking of.
That's what I said.
Okay.
So I've done some research. Thankfully, there are helpful Wikipedia articles on the. So
somebody else has done research and collected it, and you have read their research.
Somebody else has listed out every keynote there ever was, and so I've went through and went, oh yeah, that one was good. That one, not so sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a who's who of remember when this bit happened.
Yep.
What was the first one you remember watching?
Good question. I'm trying to think, because I was in year 11 when the iPhone was announced, and I remember.
What's year 11? How old are you at year 11?
16, and I remember talking about it the next day and stuff. So, yeah, I would say that one was the first one that I watched in full. So, I've got these categories.
Following on from the previous episode of you and categories, right? Tell me what your categories are.
My first.
Where are you reading this from, in fact, actually?
I'm reading this from my own personal document, which you do not have access to.
Fantastic. It's always good when we can share preparation like this.
Should we talk about our top keynote of all time first of all? Should we do that first this time? Because I think there's a clear winner. What do you think?
I think the original iPhone announcement, is the best keynote that they've done. I would argue that that's an example. I think that's the best product launch that has ever happened. I think it's the best, like, a situation where a guy stood on stage for an hour and a half and completely gripped people and made a significant impact. And I think it's completely unparalleled.
Yeah. Everything in that presentation of the iPhone was just, miles ahead of anything that previously existed.
It's interesting because they didn't start off with the iPhone. It was just a normal State of the Union type presentation, because it was done at Macworld in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And the first half hour is them just doing the normal, this is how the retail thing's going. It was...
They introduced the Apple TV for the first time.
One of the funniest bits of watching it all is that they discuss the music store, where they say Apple's the fourth largest music retailer in the world, or in the States. And 10 minutes later, he announces a product that has a large part in destroying the music sales industry and moves everything towards streaming.
Sure. But at the time of the iPhone, they were very much still on the stage of the desktop being the hub of everything.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's why it's interesting, because he says that we're the biggest retailer, we're the fourth biggest retailer of music, and then 10 minutes later he announces a product that has probably more than anything else the impact in completely changing that industry away from retail. He talks about one industry, and then 10 minutes he paves the way for that industry to become irrelevant and move towards a streaming platform. I just think that's an interesting contrast.
Yeah. The first slide that he uses is this one where you've got the Apple logo and then the sun shining behind it, and then all these like waves of light around it, and it's like a very epic slide. And
the tone completely changes, because
he goes quiet. He goes quiet for a bit, and then he's like,
"This is a day I've been looking forward to for 2.5 years."
And then he goes back and he talks about the previous breakthrough products that Apple has released over the years. He skips over some of them.
Well, no, he talks about there are a few times in your life where a breakthrough product happens. Yeah. So that's why he skips over Apple product. He's only talking about ones that had paradigm shifts in the world.
Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything. And Apple's been very fortunate. It's been able to introduce a few of these into the world.
So the Macintosh completely changed how personal computers work, because it took things from command line based input to graphical input.
Yeah, and I think when companies talk about something in their marketing, you take it with a pinch of salt. So when they say the new something is here or the feature is here, you always take it with a massive pinch of salt, But the words that he was saying right here, where he was like, "This is groundbreaking, and this is the next one of these revolutionary products." It was actually the truth, and I think you actually felt that.
I think he kind of had to, because one, I'm sure he did feel that way, but it was kind of a bet the company product that, because they invested billions in the development of that first, and they weren't the powerhouse that they are today. They were the iPod and Mac business, and this completely changed them.
And there had been rumours about Apple doing the phone for a few years.
Yeah.
Partly because it's an obvious thing, and partly probably because of internal leaks and stuff like that. But nobody knew what it was going to be. All of the mock-ups are interesting to look at because they're all they're all iPod phones, which is really interesting because when the iPad mock-ups came out, it was all iPhone tablets, which is kind of what it became, but in a different... Like, people always just think about it in the wrong way.
There were people had... some people were like, this is going to be like a MacBook Pro meets... makes a child with an iPhone. And they had like, will it have menus at the top? Will it have the menu bar? Will it have the dock? And so with the iPad, which we might talk about later on in the episode, I don't know. Because I don't have access to your notes. I'm not sure. The mock-ups beforehand were like a bridge between OS 10 and iOS, or iPhone OS as it was at the time, and people did bet on both sides of that, and it ended up just being a scaled up iPhone OS.
I think people often, when they're predicting future Apple products, they often base it on what if this particular thing was bigger or smaller.
But you can only go on what you have, and that's why he put the joke slide up of he had the slide of the iPod with the dial around the click wheel.
Yeah. And there's a lot of stories out there about how the demo just like very, very, very barely managed to make it through, and they all feel very lucky that it didn't crash, and they were all like doing shots in the audience one by one. Is their responsible parts of the presentation? This is the Apple staff. Is there
the product demo was pieced together on the thing that wasn't anywhere near a finished product. Yeah, you're right.
But the thing is that watching this in hindsight, he says, well, why do we need another smartphone? Here's 3 reasonable smartphones. And he puts up the slide, which in hindsight is like, oh, why is he showing these ridiculous things that clearly aren't? But the audience doesn't laugh at it. The audience is like, yeah, those are smartphones. And you forget, like, that was...
It's like the Palm Trio, BlackBerry, and something else, isn't it?
Yeah. And when he shows I think later on in the presentation, he does the side-by-side of, here's what messages looks like on any of these other things, and here's what it looks like on an iPhone, and here's what a calendar looks like, here's what the web looks like. And it is just miles ahead of all of these other things. And this was, I think, Apple's biggest breakthrough product.
I think the keynote's awesome. I like the beginning when he says, we're going to release 3 revolutionary products.
So, 3 things: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device.
I think the phrase internet communication device is like, huh? What?
It sounds very clunky. Like, I was like, what's this?
I don't know why they decided on that, but like, that's probably the most important thing.
I could see that it's really difficult to phrase it into like, what are we going to categorize this as? And
like,
yet it's really, really important.
And like, because they can't say the internet in your pocket, because that completely defies the next bit, like when they meld the 3 together and say this is one product. Because he does say the internet in your pocket later on in the presentation. But yeah, no, it's pretty awesome. It's pretty special, but it was expensive.
The first iPhone, yeah, it was.
Do you remember the YouTube video of the woman unboxing her first iPhone bill from AT&T?
No.
And it was like a box 1 of 6 or something.
No.
It's like hundreds of pages and a huge amount of money. It's I don't have the video at hand, but yeah, there's a really, really funny video of a woman receiving her first iPhone bill, and it came in a box.
Wow.
From AT&T.
The iPhone bill unboxing.
It was unbelievable.
That's incredible.
I remember podcasts at the time talking about it. My first iOS device was the iPhone 3G, which I got when I went to university. It was like given to me as an agreement, like, I'll get this if I agreed to phone my mother once a week. That was the deal.
That's pretty sweet. And so the iPhone definitely wins the award for best keynote.
Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
I do have another one that I wrote down. I'm not entirely sure how to phrase it, but I put most groundbreaking, which is kind of, if you exclude the iPhone, which one other than that would I say is most groundbreaking?
You mean by product launch or just presentation?
Yes, yeah, product launch. And I've put the iPhone 4.
I have the iPhone 4 on my list of keynotes. I think it's the single biggest improvement to the iPhone.
Yes.
Since the introduction to the product.
I totally agree. And I've written down, if you think about what came with the iPhone 4, it had the Retina display. It's massive. On all of the devices now.
Massive. Carry on. It had the FaceTime camera. Remember they said FaceTime was going to be an open platform?
Yeah. But
open standard.
But I think the reason that it wasn't was for some patent issue. It was a legal issue. It wasn't because they decided against it. So they had the FaceTime camera, they called it, but really it's the selfie camera. It's evolved to become the selfie camera. It had flash for the back camera. The back camera was improved, as it always was, and it had improvements to performance of the whole phone. It had an all-new glass and steel design, which when you compare it to the 3GS was just like blow away. It was much thinner as well, but just being glass on both sides, I loved the design of the iPhone 4.
Yeah, it wasn't plastic anymore. It had a lot more of a premium feel to it.
Yeah, definitely. With a steel band all the way around it, it was gorgeous. And it had 4G. Those things is just like, in combination, I can still remember the slides that he had. And the slides had a lot of skeuomorphism to them. Like, they had the numbers of, like, here's the first of 6 things that we're going to talk about. So I would put that down as most groundbreaking. But no, I wouldn't put it down as best keynote, because I think it could also fall into the category of most technical issues in a keynote, where I think all of the demos failed, or most of the demos failed, where they were trying to do connection-related things. And
yeah, it had the biggest cock up. That wasn't the one that they had LTE and 4G on.
I'm pretty sure it was. And because there was a point where he came out and he said, "Now we figured out why my demo failed earlier. It's because there were a lot of Wi-Fi base stations operating. So here's what's going to happen. Everyone in the room has to turn these things off, and we're going to turn up the lights, and everyone has to police each other on this." And then later on, he was like, "Did everyone turn off the devices?" And it was just like, I was thinking, if any other company did this, if it was Microsoft, we would be laughing at them.
Yeah, it's quite funny. If you watch the keynote now, they take that, like, if you like when they release the video afterwards, they take this stuff out. But there's a really good bit where Steve Jobs says, "Well, if you can just turn all your Wi-Fi off," and he just sits and goes, "I've got time."
Oh yeah,
And,
yeah, that's pretty good.
He just looks at it, like, and he waits for them all to turn the stuff off, and he's like, "Oh, we've figured out that there's," because it doesn't load a page, like it doesn't load anything.
Yeah.
And
it's terrible because he's got the iPhone 3GS side by side to compare it, and the 3GS actually works and it loads it faster than the iPhone 4, which makes it even more embarrassing.
Yeah. It doesn't. No, it was the iPhone 5 that had LTE and 4G.
So the iPhone 4 didn't have 4G?
Nope.
All right. Okay. All right.
So it wasn't. They didn't even have the CDM one because it was still only available on AT&T until the following January.
So what was the better connection thing that he was demoing? Was that because there was a better connection within it, right? Like, he wouldn't have done that demo of comparing it if it wasn't better.
Well, because it wouldn't have done a cellular connection if it was people on Wi-Fi base stations that knocked it off.
But you also demoed FaceTime. And FaceTime was a new feature, a new software feature, I guess, which was allowed by having the front-facing camera. So that was another thing they tried to demo. And I think that demo, they just about passed it. They brushed past. I mean, it definitely was cutting out and wasn't the greatest demo they could have done of that. I imagine they wanted it to be clean, and it, like in rehearsals, it was probably very very slick. But in that room, it was just like a low quality Skype call, basically.
I liked it. Was it with Phil Schiller, and then there was one with Johnny Ive, I think.
Yeah.
I thought they were quite good. It wasn't quite as good as the original iPhone when they phoned Starbucks and asked for 5,000 lattes. That was pretty good.
Yeah. So Steve Jobs has this steely sort of I was trying to think of a word before the show to describe it, and I can't really think of how I would put it. But he has this very steely sort of way about him, where like he stares out into the audience, like you said, and he's like, "I've got time." It's like, and he's just like looking there, and you're kind of like, if I was in that audience, I would feel afraid, even though I'm within hundreds of people, and he's not gonna be looking straight at me.
But you don't want to be that one prick that has the Wi-Fi on and he comes and talks to you.
Yeah, it's very intimidating, and even in other keynotes that I'm going to get to, where he's a bit more, apologetic and maybe not as not forthright. He's still very steely, and you wouldn't want to cross him at all.
That phone was introduced a lot of problems for them as well, because that was the one that had another follow-up event in the fall where they had the grip thing where he emailed a journalist and said you're holding it wrong.
Yep.
Because it had like where people gripped onto it, and then they had to give away free cases.
This is actually, I put it next to, because I couldn't find a category to put it in. This is called AntennaGate. They held the AntennaGate press conference, and I actually put this in my top keynotes.
There's a really interesting section in the biography about it. It's probably one of the only good things in that biography, but Walter Isaacson had him talk to him about AntennaGate and his feelings and what he was going through at the time, and how angry he was. I think he was on holiday at the time, and he had to come back.
Yeah.
And he had his kids were like with him as well, and they were like that was one of the few times where they came in and saw him do something, and like I think he actually like physically cried as well, because he was just like, this is not who we are. And there was a big scandal around the iPhone 4 because it went through the controversy of Gizmodo buying it from somebody who left it at a bar from someone who was doing field testing, and that whole scandal that happened. And then he talked about that at one of the D conferences, and he was really upset about that as well. And he was just like, it was one of the biggest sort of media backlash things around them, because there was just so much going on like that just around that product launch, like from beforehand where the phone leaked, and that was a big deal. And there was a huge scandal about it because they ended up trying to arrest the guy. I think they did arrest the guy and try and press charges against him. And then it came out, and then the people were saying that it lost signal when you held it in properly, and then he responded poorly to that. And it did have that problem, because anyone could do that. Anyone could grip it and the signal would go down.
I think Apple felt like they did a great job on the iPhone 4. Like, they just did a standout, amazing job. They thought it was going to be incredible and amazing, which it was. But
and just
then
like
to
everything went against them.
Yeah, I can totally see why they would feel a bit down about how people reacted and how everyone seemed to be like kind of out to get them, when they're like, all we're trying to do is make great products and make everyone happy.
And that's why the video that they played going on with the Song a Day man who wrote the song, saying like, if you don't want an iPhone 4, don't buy it. If you don't like it, take it back.
If you don't want an iPhone 4, don't buy it. If you bought one and you don't like, bring it back. If you don't want an iPhone 4, don't buy it. If you bought one
like it was the perfect thing for them to go on and be like, hey, we're just making things. If you don't like them, you don't have to buy them, but we're just trying to do our best job, and we're just trying to do what we can. And if you don't like it, then that's fine. But what was he saying? He said, everyone says we should just give away a free case. And he's like, fine, here's a free case.
Yeah.
Why don't you just give everybody a case? Okay, great. Let's give everybody a case.
And it was like such a defeatist sort of, well, it wasn't defeatist, but it was them showing, they're admitting fault. And I think the free cases cost them like $150 million or something to hand out.
Yeah.
But,
so I think this was a very Steve Jobs way of handling a massive crisis or a massive scandal.
By digging at other people.
Huh? Well, no, I just mean the whole keynote in general. I mean, if you think about like maps and you think about the FBI thing that's going on right now, the way that Tim Cook handles these things is they put out a press release and they do some interviews with people. It's a very Steve Jobs way to handle this sort of thing by going, I know, we're going to have our own keynote, and we're going to go out at this keynote and we're going to give the word on what's happening, and that's going to be our thing to do. And so
I think it's the only time that they've done this, though.
Oh yeah, it was
because he's written open letters before as well. Like if you look at
true,
like Thoughts on Flash was like a similar thing, like where they go, this is this is something that we're not happy about, and this is something we're getting a lot of grief about, and here's why it's there. Here's why this is the situation. Because Flash was a large press problem for them, not having Flash on the iPhone. And he was like, nope, it's a terrible product. It's a terrible technology, and it's not going to be on it. So he wrote thoughts on Flash.
Mm. The one thing about that keynote that didn't make a lot of sense, I think you kind of hinted at it, is that he quite eloquently first admitted that Apple isn't perfect. Then he laid out the facts and dispelled the myths, and he showed these other products, like you said, having the same issues. And then he went on to say, so his point up to now is basically this is bullshit, and I'll say this again. Can I say bullshit? Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was basically going like, I don't feel like I need to be here. Like, I think this is a waste of everybody's time.
Yeah.
I don't think this is as big a problem as everyone's making it out to be.
Yeah, and then he arrived at, so he said, so basically this is way below that proportion, and it's not actually an issue. It affects like 1% more calls are dropped.
He pointed out the return rate as well.
Yeah.
And he said the return rate is the same as every other iPhone, but we're still not happy about it because 1% is still 1% of phones being turned back.
Yeah. And so after all of that, the conclusion to all of this being, we don't think it's a problem, but here's what we're going to do to solve the problem that isn't a problem. And it was like, we're going to hand out free cases. And he had to do that because he had to like do more than just go on stage and say it wasn't a problem, because people need to see action and people weren't just going to accept.
Yeah, you can't just go up, invite every member of the press and say, fuck off.
Yeah.
Like, you can't do that.
But it didn't. I thought it was like telling a story the whole way that he presented everything in sequence. But the conclusion to that story didn't really gel with everything that had come before, which I mean was fine because those were the facts, and you can't just say, "Oh, actually, let's smudge the facts to make it seem like we did make a massive mistake." And you couldn't see Steve Jobs doing that anyway. But I thought it was a really interesting press conference because it was different from all the other ones, all the other keynotes. And I've watched it. I've watched it probably half a dozen times now. I think it's really interesting.
I don't think I've watched it since it happened.
Oh.
I'm very impressed with my memory of it, though.
Yeah, I am. I'm like, it sounds like you have.
No, I've not. I've seen the beginning of it because him dancing on stage.
Yeah.
Is there's like gifs of it and gifs of it. Sorry.
That's kind of what I mean though by his steely thing, which is like, although he's making this apology, he comes out with this "fuck you" song, which is like, man.
I mean, are
we going to bleep it out?
Them choosing to use that, I thought was really good. There's a really good.
Then the song wasn't apologetic. It was like the lyrics of the song were just like, I'm not going to repeat them. You already said them. But they showed the song, which suggested that that's how they felt about it. And it basically said, if you don't like it, then, you don't have to be our customer.
So do you want to move on?
Yeah. The next award that I have, do you have one that you want to nominate for most groundbreaking?
For most groundbreaking?
Or, yeah, most groundbreaking.
No, one, I didn't prepare for these because you didn't give them to me. But I have a bunch that stick out to me in my mind. That I think are really quite important that they did. I really like the iCloud presentation because it was the last one that Steve Jobs did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I think he struggled to be there, but I think that it was good that he was there. The iPad 2 one is the same because he looked really, really frail in the iPad 2 announcement, and you can tell because he hands off. He only does in the iCloud one. He just came on and was like the intermediary between other presenters.
Mm.
And it was sort of him, it was almost like him passing on the torch to the next set of people who are going to be doing these talks. And he was like, here, we are Apple, we do what we do. And here's Phil Schiller, he's going to tell you about it. Here's Craig Federighi, he's going to tell you about it. Here's Tim Cook, he's going to tell you about the retail stores. OS X was handled by Craig Federighi, or iOS was handled by Scott Forstall. And the next, whatever is going to be talked about by Phil Schiller, I think it was some Macs, and then he did the iCloud bit at the end.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool because he was like, here's where we're going now. Here's where we were before with the digital hub and the Mac was at the center. We're going to transition to this. This is where we're going. And then he walked off, and that was the last time he was on stage.
Mm.
And I thought that was really good. I have my least favorite keynote.
Oh yeah, go on.
The one, that Johnny Ive was at.
Yes.
So Johnny Ive, who's famously known for his white backgrounds in his videos, is best kept there because he doesn't have a good stage presence. He unveiled the original unibody.
Yeah.
So it was like the MacBook Pro, when they went from like the titanium cases, they made that unibody case with aluminium, and he came on and said, "Here's this breakthrough that we've had with this manufacturing." And he shouldn't have been there.
Yeah, I really like Johnny Ive, but honestly, I could have fallen asleep during that point. And
well, it was not falling asleep. He was just really nervous. Like, he just wasn't a great talker. Like, it was.
He was very slow. It was uncomfortable watching him breathing. Like, he had this really weird way of breathing where he was like, sort of like, tripping over himself and trying. Do you know what I mean? He had a really weird way of talking where it didn't seem totally natural. It was very constrained and very. Closed down.
He was he wasn't in his comfort zone. He wasn't comfortable being there, and you could tell. Because he was just like, he was closed off, his body language was all off, he was like staring at the ground.
Yeah.
He wasn't really addressing the audience, which is why he's better at these prepared recordings. Because he talks probably more than, like, as often as all the presenters now. But in his little videos.
Yeah, he gets to be pre-recorded. Maybe he was like, I'm going to do one keynote, I'm going to do it terribly, and then they're not going to ask me ever again.
But he, that presentation sticks out as like one mistake they probably never made again. They probably hired a bunch of in-house keynote trainers after that, because that's not happened since. I think Craig Federighi's first couple of presentations weren't perfect, but I think he's become one of their best presenters now. Tim Cook doesn't have a huge amount of charisma, but he you can't help that. He's the CEO. He has to come out and be the face of the company.
Tim Cook was on that unibody keynote, and that was a long time before he had any real training on it. And so he was like in early stage sort of Tim Cook PR presence, and he wasn't very good on that one either. He's
still not very good though. I mean, my only thing that I like about him is he's very earnest. Like, I believe every word that comes out of his mouth. Everything that he says, whether it's about a product or a belief that the company has, I believe every word that he says. But he doesn't have a huge amount of charisma.
I think he's gotten better. If you look back at the first ones he did as CEO, he was definitely like trying to sound excited about when he was saying certain words, like, it's amazing, and you just kind of you did it too much, and you just didn't believe it.
I think he's settled into being his own. It's like when anybody starts doing something, like when you like when you see YouTube channels start or people start podcasting or whatever. People try and imitate something that they think is good, and then they settle into their own. Like, you can see that there's like a shell of who they are coming through that, and I think that he's settled into his own thing. So he is now. He's a more serious talker, he's calm talking, and he just means everything that he says, and then he hands off to other personalities when they need to discuss things. And then Craig Federighi is a bouncy, big presence. Phil Schiller is excitable and can command a crowd. Eddie Q is a mess. And they have some other presenters as well, like Jimmy Iovine most recently, and the guy who used to work on Flash at Adobe, who now works in the Apple Watch team. Whose name escapes me. I don't know quite who you mean. I think I know. Is he the guy with the glasses? He's got like brushed over hair. Like a day in an Apple Watch person.
Yeah, I think I know who you mean. Yeah, I quite like that guy.
My favorite presentations that they've done are ones where they reveal the product in a really cool way. So the original MacBook Air, where they took it out of an envelope.
Yeah.
The iPod, where he took it out of a pocket. The iPod Nano, where he took it out of the little pocket in the big pocket of his jeans. The original Mac Pro, but it wasn't called a Mac. It was called the Power Mac. I think it was called the Power Mac at the time. That raised out of the floor and then rotated. And they did the same with the Mac Pro, the black one, the cylinder.
There was one keynote where they were showing off the Wi-Fi, because the Wi-Fi was like an amazing feature on a laptop. And so they were doing something on the web. I think they were doing a video call. And then he just picks up the laptop and he starts carrying it across the stage, and everyone starts whooping and cheering. And then he gets a hula hoop and he passes the laptop through a hula hoop to prove that there's no wires, no invisible wires attached or anything. And people thought that was amazing at the time.
Kevin Lynch is the name of the engineer.
Yeah.
So he used to work for Adobe he worked for Macromedia and then Adobe when Adobe bought Macromedia, and then he was a staunch advocate of Flash, and then he was hired by Apple.
I think you really get his passion when he delivers. He seems a lot more natural than other people.
He's a bit nerdy, but he seems super into
Yeah, definitely. He does seem nerdy, but that's kind of what I like about him.
He's just all like, look at this. This is really cool. This is my favorite bit. And
Phil Schiller has always been very natural and very good. I mean, he's head of marketing, so you kind of expect it, but he's always been great. I think we've covered all of Apple's personnel now.
What did you think of the iPad keynote? The iPad announcement, the original one, with the sofa?
I thought that it was kind of... At the time, I think I felt a bit disappointed and let down because nobody knew what it was going to be. Everybody thought... Like, I kind of want to say that it was a blown-up iPhone, which kind of is what it is, but I think most people, like you said earlier, thought that it was going to be a scaled-down Mac. But nobody really knew. Nobody knew that it would be running the iPhone OS on a bigger.
Still called iPhone OS at the time as well.
Yeah. So my impression of it, I think, was a bit disappointed. I was like, oh, that's all that it's going to be. That it's all that it's going to be used for.
Remember, they ran at different versions. Like it was iPhone OS 3 that was running on iPhones at the time, and it was 3.2 or 3.4 that was on the iPad, and it ran a couple of versions ahead, and it wasn't until iOS 4 when they brought in multitasking that they sort of brought them into unison. Although they didn't even, the iPad one I think came out a couple of months later, but that was when they brought them together, like, and brought the versions, like synced up the versions. With an
iPhone, I immediately wanted the iPhone, and every iPhone after that until I actually got one. With the iPad, I didn't feel the same. I thought it would be quite cool to have an iPad, and we ended up getting an iPad too.
Who's we?
My family. We got like a shared one for the family, and then I went out and bought my own iPad 3 when that came out.
My memory of watching that presentation was that the most groundbreaking thing about it was the price. Because everybody thought it was going to be $1,000, and it ended up being half that. And then I don't think anybody thought it was going to be that cheap. Like, it was cheaper than the iPhone was when the iPhone came out.
So our final award is for the best One More Thing.
Oh shit! I haven't looked at these.
Have a little look, and I'll tell you what mine is. Yeah, my best One More Thing was the MacBook Air redesign in 2010. So the MacBook Air was announced a few years earlier, and it was, in its own way, it was groundbreaking. It didn't have the CD drive. It probably didn't have a few other things, but it was a pretty poor machine. People had a lot of complaints about it. People didn't really like it. And at the time, a lot of people that I saw in public had 13-inch MacBook Pros. I remember it was almost all that whenever I would see a Mac out in public. And especially at university, I remember like the lecture theatre just being filled with these 13-inch machines. But then the MacBook Air 2010 was the redesign, and the redesign was gorgeous, and I bought one a few years afterwards, and it's the MacBook Air that they are still selling. It's still the same design. They've upgraded all of the internals over the years, but it's the same computer, and now I see a lot more of those out there. That's the one that people are buying. And so I thought the redesign was really the MacBook Air being like, okay, we kind of got it wrong the first time. It wasn't quite done. Here's the refined version. We've fixed all of the things with it, and here it is. And I thought it was a really good product and the best One More Thing.
I think that if you look at the original MacBook Air announcement, there are a lot of corollaries to the MacBook that they announced last year.
You mean, so the MacBook last year didn't have any ports, and the MacBook Air didn't have a DVD drive?
The original MacBook Air was incredibly underpowered, but it was innovative in its form factor. So it had a high-res display for what it was. It had a little fold-out, a couple of USB ports, and a headphone port, and that was basically all it had, because it didn't have any Ethernet or anything. it wasn't until they redesigned it with that wedge thing that had a Thunderbolt port, and I think the original one had a mini display port and a USB port, headphone port, and power, and it was incredibly underpowered because I remember working with people who'd bought them, and they were really slow. Like, you could open your mail and then shut mail and open a web browser. It was that slow. It was like a 1.8 gigahertz Core 2, I think I had in it. And it remained slow until they started putting the beefier portable CPUs in it. I think that if you look at what they've tried, what they tried to do was like, this is the future of laptops, and that was how they pitched it. And they went, this is what laptops are going to be, and then it became a product category of like Ultrabooks, and it was super expensive as well when it first came out because it was really hard to do. And then I think the same is what's happening with the MacBook, where like, here is an ultra high res display, but it has no ports, it has nothing in it but it's really light. It's essentially an iPad with that runs OS 10 with a keyboard attached. And I think that's where they're trying to pitch it as, is like this is the next stage of that. And I think that in the future they'll start adding more as the CPUs become more powerful, as the Intel M processors get a bit more capable. The MacBook Air will go into the distance a little, go into the background a little bit, and these will start taking a bit more of the forefront.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially with the USB-C as well.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think the first one is kind of like, this is where we would like to be. This is a preview, kind of. We're selling it, but this is a preview of where we want to be, and a vision of the future.
It's them kind of being ahead of the game and saying, we're betting on this happening, and this is how it can be. It's not the computer I would buy, but in 5 years' time, it might be. You used to own a MacBook Pro, and now you own a MacBook Air. So that's the kind of bet that they're making.
I like the look of them, but when you look at the internals and you're like, this is the tiny little computer, underpowered computer that they have in it.
It costs a lot of money.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, maybe not now, maybe in a few years.
That tiered battery design.
Yeah. With the redesign of the MacBook Air, what also came was an amazing new battery. Or new battery power. They made it so you could get more battery in there. And also, I think they went from the physical hard drive to being flash drives. At some point, they did that anyway. Which helped it incredibly. Like, my laptop...
That's why they were so expensive.
Yeah, but my laptop, when I first got it, was just incredible. The MacBook Air. It was like I could open an application, and then I could open 8 more, and each of them would act as if it was the first one.
SSDs are something you never turn your back on once you've tried them, because spinning disks are just too slow.
I totally agree. That is exactly the experience I had, where on MacBook Pro I'd open Xcode and it'd be like, all right, let's just wait for the bounces to happen. But now my MacBook Air is at the point of replacement where it basically does do the 5-6 bounces. It's really sad.
If you get an iMac, are you going to go for one with the Fusion drives? So you get large storage, but some fastness.
I was wondering about that. So is the Fusion drive the better one, or... Because I know there's the hard drive. I'm not going to go for that one. But then they've got the hard drive and they've got flash also, right?
There are 3 options. You can get a spinning disk,
yeah,
which you don't want. You can get all SSD, which is very expensive. Or you can get a Fusion drive, which is a hard disk drive and an SSD, but in software, how they make it seem as if it's one drive, and then they
switch between them based on what you use the most.
Well, they optimize the storage to make files and applications you access the most always on the SSD, and that changes dynamically depending on your usage of the computer. So it tries to use smarts to put what you want on the drive. The problem with it now is that it used to be 128 gigs of SSD storage that they would put on the flash partition, but now it's only 64.
Oh, they've downgraded.
And they charge the same amount of money for it.
Really? They've downgraded.
But those are the decisions you have to make. Like, if you want a terabyte SSD, it's going to cost you £1,000.
Yeah. I'm probably going to go with the Fusion drive in that case. It'll be fine. It'll be good. All right. Anything else is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, I don't think so. I had nothing in my document for this because I didn't know what we were going to be talking about. So I think I've wung it, and I think I've done an alright job at winging it, but...
If you enjoyed the podcast and you want to help out, then you can go to iTunes and rate us and leave a review. It really helps. If you want to find the links to share it, then you can find all of those links. And the links to contact us and email us and things like that and tweet at us are at mumblyhour.com/8, I think is the episode number we're on now.
Yep.
And you can also tweet us and follow us on Twitter at mumblyhour. I'm Andrew Hart.
I'm Andrew Lawson.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye.